Boyz in the Hood, what I love about the movie, so people can really see how we are, how we feel. Black reality, perfect movie for you. He put me in Boyz in the Hood to produce the black experience.
Ice Cube reveals the truth behind one of the biggest movies that shaped pop culture, Boyz in the Hood. And his revelations will leave you speechless. Boyz and the Hood's portrayal of the black culture in the United States went through the roof, competing directly with the legendary cartoon movie, The Boondocks. However, in the excitement, fans have missed obvious details, and Ice Cube has spelled them out. What went down behind the scenes, and why has Ice Cube chosen to reveal it now? Join us as we discuss Ice Cube, uncovering the details behind the scenes. How it all began. Boyz and the Hood is a cultural pace-setter that became a part of Hollywood due to the fearlessness of a young black student who chose to write a rather daring play as an application requirement to get him into film school. His idea was to capture the essence of blackness in the 90s, from living in project homes, systemic racism, fear of the police, to the feeling of a hot comb piercing through their thick hair on a Sunday. While it sounded like the right idea and good enough for an A+ in a school project, 23-year-old John Singleton had another perspective. Something different, something wild enough to make a statement for the black community and maybe even perpetuate black excellence. Although he had written it as a debut film project when applying to film school, it wasn't just some fiction that he came up with to get him into the institution. He created his movies based on his life and those of people that he knew. It had everything that made the black community tick. He wanted authenticity, so he made sure that the words were perfect, and the gang affiliations, which were a pandemic at the time in most black communities, were described perfectly. The movie was centered around 3 black kids who shared the same realities of growing up in a neighborhood where love was scanty, but guns and dope were never missing. This was a reality that John Singleton himself had lived 1,000,000 times over before he left for film school. After writing the script, he was super protective of it, making sure that it never fell into the hands of someone from Encino or Idaho. Los Angeles in the 80s and early 90s was a completely different reality for black kids who grew up in districts like Crenshaw. They knew how it felt to return from school on a sunny afternoon and hear gunshots blabbing in the skies, and the possibility of a friend being a victim of that shot. They didn't need to see drive-by shootings in the movies. They lived it as though it was just another Tuesday. Ergo, it was difficult for John Singleton to see anyone else producing this masterpiece if it wasn't him or another black kid bred in Los Angeles, especially Crenshaw. But how did he get this school project to go mainstream and into the theaters? The bold step. Already, the themes in the movie were nothing short of bold, and not many producers might be completely willing to take a shot on a 23-year-old's ingenuity in directing a play. However, he chose to send it to Columbia, basically expecting nothing to come out of it. But to his surprise, he had the theater eggheads at Columbia dying to buy the script from him. The process was short and precise. He had the script sold, but he was also tasked with directing it and picking the cast list. The cast list was not the lengthiest anyway. He was a young black kid who had just graduated from film school and trying his hand at a new project. Not many people knew who he was or what he was really capable of as a writer or producer, but that was not enough to deter him or stop him from finding his own cast. And that's where his past affiliation with Ice Cube came into the picture. He had a character that depicted what it meant to be a Los Angeles kid with a knack for violence, and he called that character Doughboy. While many of the other top actors were just debuting on the big silver screen, including Morris Chestnut, Cuba Gooding, and Ice Cube, the latter was already a rapper with the NWA, a crew of MCs that focused on gangsta rap. and the movement for black freedom. Ergo, it was easy for Ice Cube to flesh out his role as Doughboy. To him, it wasn't acting. It was he reliving a reality that he had seen so many times, and it was the perfect visual representation for people who weren't certain of what the black community was. However, it wasn't just Ice Cube on the cast list who understood the intricacies of the black neighborhood. Morris Chestnut and Cuba Gooding knew exactly what it took to survive in Los Angeles as a black kid. The oppression wasn't exactly always from the outside. Most of the time, it came from within the neighborhood. The gun violence came with the gang affiliations, where every kid had to pick a side, choosing between two of the biggest sides in the district, the Crips and Bloods. Creating a movie about black excellence and its meaning in every sense in the Los Angeles suburbs, without a proper representation of the gangs, was an incomplete project. They were guys on the sidewalks, the drive-by shooters, the vixens in huge rap videos. They reset fashion trends, and also were the reasons the Crenshaw alleys at night were a dangerous place to go. Depicting the gangs to perfection was never going to be easy without the codes, the slang, code mixing, rapport with the police, and the consequences of the #1 rule in the hood, the no-snitch culture. Ice Cube, being the lead actor and also an old friend of John Singleton, the producer, learned to recreate set moves, especially since John enlisted the help of real-life gang members to teach them the dress codes and how they walk, and it was regarded as one of the best performances ever seen on television. How did he make that happen? Ice Cube spills the tea. Working on the set of a movie that he was so culturally attached to created a different level of seriousness in his acting. While he had been in several rap music videos, working closely with legends of the rap game like Eazy-E, and shared a stage with other A-listers like Coolio and Biggie Smalls, being on a professional movie set was a different kettle of fish. Improvisation was at a minimum, and he would have to learn a script by heart and deliver it offhand. Although it is technically acting, he is a black kid who actually lived the same realities. Hence, getting it work was going to be the least of his problems. However, John Singleton was a perfectionist, and he wanted everyone else on set to match the same perfectionist energy.
Go on programs and they say, oh, the gang film Boyz n the Hood. The film is not a gang film. The film is about a black man.
That he brought with him. The pressure, for him, was real. This was his shot at being great, and he was going to do it using a story that he had lived all his life. Ergo, failure was not even an option. O'Shea Jackson, mostly called Ice Cube, claimed that most of the scenes were original and off the cuff, especially the drive-by scene. The reaction on their faces was absolutely real because they had no idea that John Singleton had switched the rounds of the bullets in their guns for live ones. In the movie, Doughboy was obviously taken aback when he fired the gun, giving him a bit of shock value when he killed a person face to face for the first time. John Singleton wanted to capture that feeling of fear and regret that came with taking a life, even though it was all about revenge. Obviously, it was an emotional dagger point in the movie, and most fans were lost in the moment, watching the little kid, Doughboy, come of age and become a cold-blooded killer that the violence in his community had turned him into, while most people believed that Ice Cube came in with his star power and threw his weight around to get the lead scene. It was much different behind the scenes. Also, Ice Cube did not particularly qualify as an actor, as he had no experience of being one. But John's persistence after meeting him backstage at an Arsenio Hall show when he was only a junior at the University of Southern California took the rapper aback. He was shocked seeing someone his age walk up to him, knowing how influential he was, and still trying to talk him into making a movie. He got so into the conversation that he got ditched by the same cars that brought him. and Ice Cube had to give him a ride back to the hotel where he had the time to talk him into it. But the movie did not happen until graduation, when he reached out again, but this time through his manager, and found a way to bring him into the fold. How exactly did John Singleton make the filming work? John Singleton's filming approach. Talking about having a band of misfits together in a movie, Boyz n the Hood is the perfect example. Ice Cube was a debut actor and a rapper who loved to do things off the cuff. Morris and Cuba were debutantes with no experience at all on the big screen. But John had found his cast.
John Singleton, he's a 22-year-old brother. This is his first movie, graduated out of USC.
As even when the top brass at Columbia tried to influence his choices, he fought to keep his cast choice. While John had just graduated from film school, he was simply thrown into the deep end by the Columbia directors, who wanted him to direct the movie. He had little knowledge of being behind the camera and calling the shots. So he made a choice that no one really saw coming. He chose to film every scene on different days, creating a realistic feeling of natural timing and balance, but also giving himself the time to hone his skills and find a way to improve the camera work and screenplay. Although it was his first time on the job, he had theoretical knowledge of certain filming techniques, but his favorite, which he repeated a lot when he shot the movie, was reportage, a photographic style that let him capture the exact theme of a certain scene in just one picture. For example, the scene where a kid was going home from school and walking past grown men rolling and betting on dice on the sidewalk. Then a little scuffle happens, and he lets the violence that he had left behind turn his head, watching how it ends. It was a rather difficult technique to master, especially for a man who had never shot a film, but he made it work. However, the real problem with his approach came from the stiff rebuttal that he allegedly had from the executives at Columbia, who wanted a slightly different ending. The movie already started with a rich tapestry of cultural nuances on display. Black kids coming of age, grooming their little hairs into a big afro, learning to ride a bike on the sidewalk, and getting threatened with a gun by a gang member. The sadness had already crept in with one of the three little kids whose life the movie centered on, losing his life to the violence on the streets, and it was obvious how much the other kids felt about it. For the top brass, that was already enough death and tragedy, and they had allegedly hoped for a different ending. Maybe Doughboy looks at all the violence and decides to move out of that same city, and Trey lives with Brenda for a happy ever after. But John Singleton had seen this play out over and over again. This was not some movie script that he crafted out of an imaginative hell. This was his hell, his paradise, his life. He had lived, loved, and hated it equally. But more importantly, he knew how it always ended. Almost no one makes it out of the hood alive. Ergo, changing the ending was a wild goose chase, and he was not ready to take on the possibility of taking that realism away from the black community, who had shared the same experiences with him. In the end, he had the creative license to do what he wanted, and he was sure to sell the sadness like he wanted to. Doughboy got revenge for Ricky. Tree moved out with his girlfriend and decided to go to the university with his girlfriend in Atlanta. But Doughboy was shot dead weeks later, and only 1 out of 3 made it out. But there remains that burgeoning question that has pummeled at the throat of most fans for a long time about the authorship of this movie. While John Singleton had claimed that Boyz n the Hood had a different title back in the day, why did he make the change? The Boyz n the Hood name change. Just like the movie suggests, Boyz n the Hood was a complete coming-of-age project. For some context, the movie was always titled Summer of '84. It was the same time that the events had taken place in the real world, and he wanted the title to carry them. While that was quite understandable from his perspective as the writer, there was a cultural change happening right in front of his eyes, and the rap game was an immense part of it. For some context, Eazy-E, the Fat Boys, Run DMC, and Houdini were all huge names that ruled the rap genre at the time, dictating the rhythm and setting the trends. However, it was not long before the age of the 90s when rappers like Tupac Shakur, the Notorious B.I.G., Nas, Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, Lauryn Hill, Wu-Tang Clan, Dr. Dre, DMX, and LL Cool J, alongside influential groups like A Tribe Called Quest, The Roots, and Outkast, took the pen game to a whole new level, and black culture was improving further than the event that happened in the summer of 1984. During the early 90s, John Singleton had an epiphany while he listened to a track called Boyz in the Hood, which was vocalized by the legendary Eazy-E, but written by the young shot that Dr. Dre had been raving about to the rap gods at the time, O'Shea Jackson, Ice Cube. While John sat by lonesome, listening to the lyrics of the song and how much it captured the realities of the hood where he came from, he decided to rename the movie that he already had in his hands, changing it from Summer of '84 to Boyz in the Hood. Not only was the song a perfect fit for the themes that he wanted to show in the story, but it also told another story about undercover cops and young black kids who worked as dope pushers. But just how much did this movie influence the black community? The cultural amplification of the black community. The black community in Hollywood had been on a meteoric rise since the 80s, with world-class star actors like Eddie Murphy, Whoopi Goldberg, Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Lawrence Fishburne, Angela Bassett, and Morgan Freeman leading the scenes. They had made movies like Cry for Freedom, Glory, and Beverly Hill Cops that set the tone of the black culture appreciation in the United States and all over the globe. But not many of them discussed the pain of the black community and the internal oppression that ripped it apart from the inside out. This screenplay and the debut of actors who had never been on the set before but got their big break from this movie opened up a channel of opportunities for black folk in Hollywood, especially with top lead actors like Morris Chestnut and Cuba Gooding, who featured in one of the most important movies of the 20th century, Fighting Temptation, alongside Beyonce Knowles. While that seemed like a new bunch of young black actors being bled into a Hollywood space that already had some of the best of the black generation ahead of them, the producer and director level was a completely different ball game. Before John Singleton's debut movie, which he shot as an amateur by the way, there were already black producers like Spike Lee, who made Do the Right Thing and School Days, Quincy Jones, Behind the Color Purple, Berry Gordy, who produced The Last Dragon, and Deborah Martin Chase, known for early work on The Jacksons, An American Dream. While a vast majority of their movies were highly rated around the world, none of these producers had ever been nominated for the Best Director category at the Oscars. But right after Boyz in the Hood came to the fore, John Singleton became the first ever African American to be nominated at the Oscars Award for the categories of Best Producer and Best Original Screenplay, while also setting the record as the youngest African American man to ever be awarded a nomination, as he was only 24 years old at the time. Although he did not win, he had forged a path that, from the originality of his neighborhood to the grand stage of the Oscar Award, paved the way for the upcoming generations, especially Steve McQueen, who became the first and only African American to have ever won the Oscar Award in the Best Producer category. While John Singleton died of a stroke at the age of 51, the cast of his pace-setting movie, including Morris Chestnut, Cuba Gooding, and Ice Cube, keeps the legacy alive with interviews and occasional Boys in the Hood roundtable talks. So Singleton's memories are forever. Just how much more do you think Ice Cube still hides? Do you think John Singleton changing the name of the movie was important to its success? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.